Hello and welcome to Coop's Controversies, the show where I join my fellow YouTuber Sam Popkin and discuss the controversial guitar opinions that we both share. This week's controversial opinions is offset Fenders are the best Fenders. And disclaimer, these are our opinions. These are not supposed to be taken as orders on what you should and shouldn't get. These are merely opinions that we discuss to help you better understand what could be best for you. So on this week's show, again, we are discussing my opinion that offset Fenders are the best Fenders.
Speak for yourself, Coop.
So this is my favorite guitar of all the ones that I own. And if you see the channel, it is about a grotesque collection of guitars that I own. However, this is my Fender Classic Player Jaguar 2019. I love this guitar. It is currently in standard tuning, though 20 minutes ago it was an open G because I play a lot of Keith Richards stuff on here. And yeah, it was the only year of the Pal Faro fretboard because after this they went to the Vintera series, so the Classic Player series was no longer. It was a special edition because the normal Classic Player had humbuckers like Kurt Cobain's, when this one kept the traditional single coils, and these are actually modded single coils. This is Creamery extra wide Alnico 5 non-RWRP pickups that I got and installed this year. And yeah, everything else is pretty traditional on here. The traditional pot values. The Strangle Switch is a slightly different value of capacitor. I believe it's capacitor, maybe it's a resistor, I don't really know, in there. That just makes it a little more usable instead of brightening up and ice picking up your entire sound. And then the rhythm circuit is the traditional rhythm circuit. So you'll see like the Johnny Marr signature Jag has a kill switch there. Elvis Costello's signature Jazzmaster, I don't know if he has a signature, but anyway, his Jazzmaster is taped over there so that he can't use it. So yeah, this is my favorite guitar. Sam, what is your favorite guitar?
I'm holding my Fender Telecaster. It's my favorite guitar. I bought new in 2007.
You're old. I was 6.
Don't rub it in, Cooper. And I bought it new, and it originally had a Seymour Duncan mini humbucker in it. So it's the American vintage Hot Rod 52 Tele. So I changed the pick guard. I put in no caster pickups to make it a little more traditional. Also put in the top hat switch because I love Bruce Springsteen. And but it's vintagey, but it also has the 9.5-inch radius and a satin finish on the back and compensated saddles.
So just since Sam mentioned vintage, what is separate from vintage, this is based on a 62 Jag, which is the first year that they came out. It does have a slab board that I doubt you can see, but maybe I'll take a picture. And it's a Pal Faro board, but it is a slab board. It has a real bone nut, which most Fenders, when they're labeled bone nuts, don't have actual bone. This is supposedly real bone. I have no idea if that's true. And it has a bridge that is moved slightly forward. I believe it's about a centimeter forward, so not insignificant. And that's just to get the break angle of the string better over that bridge. The other thing is that the original bridges on offsets were these, I'll put a picture in, these barrels that were threaded like kind of screws. And the issue is anytime you bent the note because of low break angle, or really anytime you hit the guitar with any sort of gusto, it would pop out of that socket into the next one and detune. Most Fenders nowadays come with either Mustang bridges or this, which is a Gibson style tunematic bridge, which I believe Fender calls the Adjustomatic bridge. And I like this because I can get really fine in the intonation, which this guitar definitely needs. And then the neck angle is shifted slightly back, again, for better break angle over the neck so that you can raise that bridge a little more. Yeah, but otherwise it is actually somewhat of a vintage accurate 62 Jag that they made in their Mexican factory. And it is my favorite guitar that I own.
Is yours polyester or polyurethane?
This is polyester. The Jazzmaster that I believe you can see off screen that we will be showing is polyurethane. So let's talk about what makes something an offset. It is, most simply, that the body underneath is non-symmetrical. So you can see there's a lower bout that goes a lot lower, and the upper bout curves upward. Now, if you look at a Telecaster or even a Stratocaster, it is completely symmetrical across the bottom and mostly flat. That's all that an offset is. People will often group certain other Fender guitars that were cheaper on the used market, like Jags and Jazzmasters, such as Music Masters, Mustangs, Duosonics, as offsets. They're not really, but for today, we're just going to talk about a Jag and a Jazzmaster, the two classics. So what are the features of an offset? Sam, you want to go through?
So body shape is one.
Body shape.
The tremolo
and
system.
Wait, just on a note on that, a Jag and a Jazzmaster body shape, a lot of people think they're identical. They are slightly different. A Jag is a slightly more pointy upper bout right here, and it comes to a slightly more curve down here, and the body is slightly smaller. So just as a note, they are not identical.
You always need to see diagrams to understand that.
I can barely see it either. I feel it more than I see it. Yep.
Yeah, so the tremolo system is unique to offsets. Leo Fender designed a special tremolo system after the Stratocaster design. You know more about that than I do, though.
Yep, so this is a floating tremolo system. It is a top loader, unlike a Tele or Strat, which are usually loaded from the back, as Sam will show you. This is not loaded from the back, it's loaded from the body. And by that, loaded, I mean the strings. So yeah, and then this is a floating bridge. It works because there's a spring, and then I believe it's a steel or aluminum plate that bends, and then this part of it bends ever so slightly in and out. It is one of the more stable tremolo systems, so if you've ever had a Strat and it goes out of tune all the time, this will not do that. However, a lot of people find it too subtle for their liking. It is sort of like a Bigsby. But yeah, one of those unique 60s tremolos that we 50s, I guess, tremolos that we kind of forget about. So it's the only tremolo system I have on any of my guitars. And I don't know if that's for a reason, but I have a hardtail Strat. I don't have Bigsbys on any of my Gibsons or Maestros for that matter. So yeah, I guess this is the trem system that I like. Other features.
Rhythm circuit.
The rhythm circuits. It's a lot more visible on a Jag because of the chrome, but it's also on a Jazzmaster. It was designed by Leo Fender on the Jazzmaster so that you could have a rhythm sound and then a lead sound. When you switch into the rhythm circuit, it deactivates this pickup. It automatically turns on the neck pickup, even if it wasn't on. It runs it through a capacitor that takes off a lot of the high end and it preserves a lot of the low end. I think it's, what is that, a high pass filter?
Low pass filter.
Low pass filter. I never can get those straight. Yeah, it's something like that. And Leo designed it on the Jazzmaster to be kind of for that jazz rhythm playing. So like, type of stuff. And then on the Jag, it was for a rhythm sound so that you could switch immediately into lead sounds. So for example, if you're in the rhythm sound, and then you have your solo. So yeah, that's what it was used for. I really like it, but a lot of people, most notably Elvis Costello, tapes it off. Johnny Marr gets rid of it and just has a kill switch, I'm pretty sure. So a lot of people don't like it. It's one of my favorite things about an offset, but it's divisive, let's just say. Yeah. And then just as a note, the reason that the offset body became popular was for jazz players, which is what the Jazzmaster was designed for. They sit down, they don't stand up. And so he wanted to make a better balancing guitar sitting down. And what's interesting about this is I got my Strat after I got my Jaguar. And because of that, I actually find this a much more comfortable guitar.
It's also funny because a lot of 60s players that use offsets were standing up doing surf stuff.
Right.
So they weren't even sitting.
Yeah. And then the other thing is bright ice picky single coils. So these are a little different because I wanted them a little hotter, but overall bright, spanky single coils that just poke through a mix. And it's a common misconception that Jazzmaster pickups are P90s. Could not be further from the truth. They are really low-lined, very wide single coils. And I'll throw up a picture of what the wine looks like on this video. So yeah, let's get into the history of how Leo Fender went from the Telecaster through to the Jag. This is going to take us from 1950 to 1962. And then, yeah, this will just help you understand what he was thinking in the time. So Sam, why don't you start off with the story of the Telecaster?
No pressure there. So in 1949, actually,
49.
Leo came up with the Esquire design, which was the Telecaster, but without the neck pickup. I believe it didn't have a truss rod.
No.
And it had a pine body.
And I think it had 3 on a side tuners too.
Say it again?
3 on a side tuners for the prototype.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the prototype with like the white buttons.
Yeah.
That's in a museum somewhere. But the Esquire came into production, and then in 1950 it became the Broadcaster with this neck pickup. But then Gretsch owned the Broadcaster patent name for their drums and sent a cease and desist to Leo Fender. And so Leo cleverly scratched off the Broadcaster name on the headstock.
That's where the no-caster thing comes from, right?
That was considered the no-caster because it had no name on it. That was only from late 1950 to 1951. And then in late 1951, he came up with the name Telecaster. But it's really the same guitar as the Broadcaster, and that's considered the black guard. In 1954, they moved to the white guard and staggered pole pieces on the bridge pickup. And 1954 is also the year he came out with the Stratocaster. And that was actually a collaboration with, oh my God, I forget which person it was at Fender.
I don't know. It's something like that. I'll look it up.
Western swing players, what they didn't like about the Telecaster. And one of that was the body digging into your ribs, and so that's where the contour came in on the Strat. Separate intonation saddles, a whammy bar, which mine doesn't have, or yours. But
the hardtail was available at the time.
Yeah, some of that. Yeah,
I mean,
some maple necks at this point too.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see. Sam was supposed to come with me to see Joe Bonamassa, who has, I believe it is a 54 hardtail, and he does this whole like Eric Johnson meets Gilmore set song that's like 10 minutes long, and it's just like Guitar Hero galore. It's awesome, and definitely part of the reason I went for, I mean, I already had a hardtail at that point, but Joe Bonamassa is definitely part of the reason I went for a hardtail Strat. That's for another video.
So you got to see that. A real hardtail in person.
Yeah.
So mine's not a hardtail, but it has
you also have the 63
system there. Wow. Well, both of us have gotten to play vintage Strats before, so
yep.
But yeah, the Stratocaster came out in 1954, and then had some changes, and in 1959 moved to the rosewood fingerboard.
The Jazzmaster came out in late 1958, if I'm not mistaken. And it was, Leo Fender had kind of done really well with the country and country western scenes that he was going after, I believe, with the Strat and the Telecaster. And in the 50s, what we have to remember is that jazz was still really popular. It was, as rock and roll was coming in, people thought it was a fad. I don't know if by 58, but easily by the 60s, people thought rock and roll was dead. So they weren't looking at that. They were looking at longer lasting genres. And Leo wanted to conquer the jazz market. Now, jazz is the realm of the big archtop Gibsons. They didn't even like going electric, let alone going to a solid body guitar. So Leo Fender came out with this, and it had wider single coils that were supposed to be more full range and kind of a little warmer and help jazz players get that tone that they're going for. The rhythm circuit, as shown on the Jaguar for this, was again supposed to get that kind of dead jazz tone that a lot of people like. He wanted to make it simpler with the volume and tone because apparently people with the Strat were complaining with the two tone knobs. I don't really know why. And then he did a more jazzy tremolo unit for players that didn't like as extreme movements as you could get with the Strat. This longer trem unit is a lot more stable. At this point, this Jazzmaster is the same scale length, 25.5 inches as every Fender. And actually the necks are interchangeable with Strats because of that scale length. So you can take a Jazzmaster neck and swap it onto a Fender Strat. Another thing that you can see this actually, that Fender did this in 65, right after the acquisition by CBS. Some Strats came out with bound fingerboards. I believe Eric Johnson plays one of those. I don't know if that's true. But they came out with bound fingerboards, and the reason for that was actually that was the Jazzmaster bound fingerboard that they put on some of the Strats. So cool thing there. This is based on kind of the earlier 50s ones, later 50s ones instead of the earlier 60s ones. And yeah, it's one of I love this guitar. It's a great guitar, especially for the money. You can't beat something like this. And yeah, this is 58. However, there's one issue, and what's that issue, Sam?
I'm not sure where you're going.
Jazz players did not like the Jazzmaster.
That's very true.
So they stuck with their Gibsons. I mean, they even struggled to go to Les Pauls, let alone go to something quacky and single coily and bright. So they stuck with their Gibsons, and this was branded a failure. That is until the surf scene took off. And the surf scene in California, where Fender was, and that's important, it was the first music scene that was really taking place where Leo Fender was, that he had a lot of exposure to. And they actually took up this sound. If you look at the famous recordings of the Ventures, the lead guitar player, I believe, I forget his name, is playing one of these. A lot of the surf bands, I believe the Shantays too, you see Jazzmasters. Jazzmaster, in a weird way, became the sound of surf, and very quickly Leo Fender was looking to improve upon it because Leo Fender was always improving. So sticking to his 4-year timelines, in 1962, he comes out with a more surf-oriented version of this guitar called the Jaguar. So the Jaguar, again, this is a slightly modified, but basically based on a 62 spec. The Jaguar was designed to be a little more focused, a little more punchy, a little more in your face, and it was designed for the jazz scene. But there is an issue. By 62, I'm sorry, it was designed for the surf scene, but there is an issue. In 62, the surf scene was kind of dying out, and they were happy with their Jazzmasters and they were happy with their Strats. Dick Dale was the king of the surf guitar, and he was using a Strat left-handed Strat strung upside down. And so, yeah, the Jaguar didn't do great. A lot of famous people got their hands on Jaguars, but they never really took off. So, for example, Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys used a Jaguar on a lot of the famous recordings, but by the time they were really playing live and it could get publicity, he was using Casinos and Rickenbackers. Jimi Hendrix had a Jaguar, didn't like it. Keith Richards had a Jaguar, didn't like it. And it was branded another failure. Now, more recently, surf players, especially in Japan, I believe, use Jaguars all the time because they are the perfect guitar. And the mods that Leo Fender did for the Jaguar that he was thinking would be really useful for the surf scene are a couple. One, he shortened the scale length to 24 inches. That is 3/4 of an inch shorter than Gibson, and it is 1.5 inches shorter than all the other Fenders of the standard non-student lines. And this is weird. He supposedly did it to be more in line with Gibson, but it creates a very unique feel. I use 11 gauge strings on this guitar. That is because it needs it, not because I love 11 gauge strings, because it needs that tension. The other thing is he added a 22nd fret. That is standard on this type of Jag. All vintage Fenders, I'm pretty sure all of Sam's Fenders, my Strat, the Jazzmaster have 21 frets. So this gives you that extra note that we always use.
It's funny because it's also short scale, so it's like really crammed in there.
So you cannot change necks for Jaguar. Just know that if you're a Jaguar fan, you cannot do that because it is shorter scale, 22 frets. And then it's got the pointier headstock because we know the bigger a headstock is, I'm a fan of big headstock Strats, bigger the headstock is, the more tone there is. And that's just a fact of life. So yeah, and he kept the tremolo system. This is actually a real Fender trem system. When on the Squire, it has a foreign made one. That's just budget. The other thing is they added the Strangle Switch, not the Fender Switch, the Strangle Switch. And what that was because a lot of players, when this was coming out in 62, the tweed amps had just been phased out. The blonde amps were just coming into production. Tweed amps are very dark. Surf music is very bright and reverby. So to punch through and really get that bright, quacky sound, he wanted to put a passive bass cut. So I believe that's a low pass filter.
High pass.
High pass filter. I'm never going to get this right.
You let the highs pass through.
High pass filter.
There you go. Actually, Dick Dale was partially responsible for those piggyback blonde amps.
Oh, really?
Because,
I didn't know that.
He wanted that reverb sound and that big surf sound clean for live use, especially Fender Bassman or Twin just weren't cutting it. So.
And on that note, another reason that they did this type of setup is because if you think about it, the lows distort sort of first. And so you can keep it cleaner for longer by engaging that. This specific Strangle Switch is slightly more subtle than the vintage ones are. I've played vintage Jags. I played 5 of them actually, because I'm a bit of a Jag nerd. And they all kind of sound different when you hit that Strangle Switch. So it really is luck of the draw. I really liked it because I can often find my amps being too bassy, because apparently that's just a pet peeve of mine. Just flick that up and it's beautiful. So I like it. And yeah, Leo Fender really thought that this was an improvement and he put a price tag on it to show that improvement. This was more expensive, I believe, than a Gibson 335 or even a 345. It was like more
deluxe model, right?
It was the highest end model. One of these in a custom color, I believe, was even more expensive than a 355. So that's more expensive than literally most guitars you can think of, an SG, a Les Paul, Strat, a Tele. All of this was more expensive, and because of that, not a lot of people bought them. And again, they got into the hands of famous players, but no one ever really used them. That is until, and we're gonna talk about this right now, I guess, even though, that is until the alternative guys got a hold of it. And people like, I'm blanking on all the names.
Elvis Costello, like in the New Wave era.
Yeah, New Wave era.
And,
they got hands of offsets, both Jags and Jazzmasters, and really started to make use of how good they sounded with reverb, how bright they were. Johnny Marr of the Smiths, while in the Smiths, he didn't really use a Jag. After the Smiths, became obsessed with them and actually has his own signature Jaguar. And the reason he did that was because he found them very similar to the Rickenbackers that he was playing, but that they were more stable because they were a solid body guitar. And also Rickenbackers have their own quality issues. Not to say I don't love Rickenbacker, I do. But they do have quality issues. So that's why he decided to go with a Jaguar. And that's actually one of the reasons I love my Jaguars. I like playing Beatles. And you can get that really bright, quacky, Gretsch Rickenbacker thing. Is it exact? Absolutely not. However, it sounds really good to me, and it does that thing for me. It also is my 2 pickup Fender with a slightly hotter bridge. And I use that for Keith Richards-y stuff because I'm a huge Keith Richards fan, and I tried to own a Tele and it just was not my thing. So I can use that and it gets me close, and you can see that. You can see it being used as a Tele in my Good Times, Bad Times video on YouTube, where I'm trying to use it like Jimmy Page's Tele. But it is a shorter scale, and that has its own unique tone. And I've always liked that I sound like myself on this guitar. I'm not trying to sound like anybody else. And that's a really important thing, I think, creatively for me. But other players don't mind that as much. Sam very much buys, I think it's fair to say, buys his guitars because of his hero's influence on him, and that's what gives him, is this fair, Sam? That's what gives you kind of your playing inspiration?
Yeah, and you bought the Jaguar without necessarily having like a hero that used one. And
no, I mean, I'm a huge Beach Boys fan, but but that is by no means the reason that and I'm a huge Smiths fan.
Yeah.
No.
And it's coming to your own as your signature kind of sound and guitar. So it's a great thing.
Yeah.
I still don't understand Jags fully, even after this video. Like,
I will
switching the
I will go into that right now, but I'm gonna clap just in case I have to cut it. There are 3 switches down here, 1 switch up here. When this is down, forget all of this. When this is up, forget everything below the pickups. Okay?
Okay.
So it's up, it's in the rhythm mode. You're only using this pickup. It's being run through the capacitor. That makes it beautiful and warm, or I'm sorry, muddy and gross, whatever side you're on.
Adjectives.
Volume, tone.
Yeah.
This pickup, that's it.
Yeah.
Switch it down, forget everything that's up here. You go down here. These 2, on for the neck, off for the neck, on for the bridge, off for the bridge.
Oh, that's weird. I always thought on was down. Okay.
Nope, on is up.
On is up.
Toward the pickup, which that can become a problem for some people who pick down.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's the strangle switch. On is up. And by the way, you can just flip that in the cavity if it bothers you that much, because a lot of people do that. But then your strangle switch is on the wrong side.
And we should say that a Jazzmaster just has a traditional like
Yep.
Gibson switch.
Yeah, weirdly enough, has a Gibson style switch. And then this is the strangle switch, which again, for any pickup combination other than in the rhythm circuit, it will, I don't think it works in the rhythm circuit. I don't know. Anyway, it will cut off some bass and make it better in the high treble. It is a high pass filter. And then when you're in that section, this is the master volume, master tone. So yeah, right now I'm going to talk about the story of this guitar, this specific guitar, because it is a really special guitar for me, which is funny because it's one of the few guitars that I have that doesn't have a name. And so, because my 335 is named Bertha, my Strat is named Marcia, my SG doesn't have a name either, but I'm thinking on it. So this is just my Jag. It doesn't have a name. And I don't know why. But I was in Austin. This shirt is no coincidence. And I went to Austin Vintage Guitars. And at the time, my main guitar was my SG, which has been featured on the channel. But I also loved playing jazz boxes. I had an Eastman jazz box. I'll throw a picture of that up. And I had a 335 at the, no, I had sold the 335, but I had a 335 PV 335 that I had a little before that. And a little before that, I had a Schecter Custom 24 copy, like a PRS Custom 24 copy. So I was very much in humbucker land. I was very much trying to be a jazz player, which I've learned that I am not. And I was really in over my head, I'd say, with what I was doing in guitar. I felt very lost at the time. And this was literally like days before the pandemic took off in March 2020, because I was in Austin as they canceled South by Southwest. And so I went to Austin Vintage Guitars and I was playing a bunch of stuff, old old Firebirds, old Thunderbirds, some modified 80s and 70s Norland era SGs, a Les Paul Deluxe, some cool stuff. And obviously I was a younger kid, so they weren't letting me touch anything super expensive from the back case or whatever. But hanging there was a Fiesta Red? No. Candy Apple Red.
Dakota Red?
Dakota Red. It was either Candy Apple or Dakota. I think it was
Dakota.
Candy. It was Dakota?
Yeah.
All right. Dakota Red 67 Jaguar.
Block inlay.
Block inlay. The darkest rosewood fretboard I've ever seen. Bound. And I picked it up because it looked cool. And for no other reason. And I plugged it into a Blues Junior, so nothing all that special. And I just played on the bridge pickup. And from somebody who came from humbucker world, I had never heard anything that bright, that melodic, that spangly. And then I was like, cool, this sounds really great. And I kind of fell in love with that guitar. So then I played a Jazzmaster that was a more modern Fender, didn't really like it. And I played a Strat, and I was like, this is okay. And I played a Tele, and I'm like, yeah, this is cool. But I really, really connected with that vintage Jag. And so I came back home, and this is, again, days, probably the day that the pandemic like really hit all of us. And I was messaging people on Facebook Marketplace because I knew I wanted a Fender at this point, because all I had was Epiphones and Schecters. And I'm like, I need something with single coils. So this one guy has this guitar listed for $700, which is more than a fair price for a classic player Jaguar. And I think his wife wanted him to sell it because he had too many guitars, and he wasn't too worried about the money, because I shot him a really 18-year-old message of, I can afford about $300 right now. I can meet you tomorrow if you want me to. And he responded back, sure. So we met him at the Guitar Center by me, and I played through it. And I knew it was my guitar. And again, I'm pretty sure that Guitar Center closed the next day. That's how close we were to the pandemic. So this guitar became my main guitar through the pandemic. And as I was taking guitar lessons with Sam or with my other guitar teacher, this is the guitar I played, and I played it constantly. And because of that, this is also my happy place guitar. If I'm feeling down with my playing, if I'm feeling frustrated with my sound, this is the guitar I'm gonna go to, because it's just the best thing ever. So yeah, that's... That's kind of the story of how I got into Jags and into offsets. So then the question becomes, why did I buy a Strat? Because viewers of this channel know I love my Strat. It is a Hardtail 62 reissue. And this is a question that I actually want to ask Sam, because he had his Tele before his Strat. So why did you buy a Strat?
So my only two guitars for about 8 years or so was a Les Paul and then a Tele. So I bought the Tele because I wanted something to complement the Gibson, a bright Fender. I love Bruce Springsteen. So the Tele was kind of the choice. And then for a while, I was really content with those two options. But I graduated college, and as a gift from my family, the choice was, do I go Gretsch, like a Pete Townsend orange Chet Atkins model, or do I go a Sonic Blue Strat because of the Beatles? I was kind of vehemently against Strats as a Tele player, and I love Jimi Hendrix, but I didn't want to sound like Jimi. I didn't want to be in that school of playing as much as I loved the songs. But I think I approached Strats from a different angle, just in that world, and I ended up with the Sonic Blue, this one. It turned out to be green, and I've had some issues with that and modded, this neck. And
I will put the reverb, hopefully it's sold by the time this video is posted, but I will put the reverb and eBay links for anybody who's interested. That is the Strat, going into my story. That is the Strat that I played that convinced me I needed one. So I went to Sam's house for a weekend. I was expecting to fall in love with his Les Paul and need to get upgraded pickups in my SG, or potentially a better SG to put the pickups that are in it. And I played that Strat, getting in between positions, using my Soul Food, so a Klon style pedal, doing my John Mayer and SRV type things. And I was like, this is it. This is what I need. So a Strat and a Jag are different. I got a hardtail in a lot of ways because I didn't want to replace this. But I use my Strat almost exclusively for blues, Grateful Dead stuff, 60s, 70s music. This I use for everything. I will play blues on this, and people, Sam laughs at me when I send him blues clips on this. I will play Beatles stuff on this. The Beatles never played a Jag, but it totally works. I'll play Grateful Dead stuff on this. I'll play Grateful Dead stuff on any of my guitars, but but I will do it on this if I want that really bright thing. If my amp is feeling really dark, this is the guitar I go to because it's ice picky through anything. So yeah, I've just really fallen for this thing. And finally, by the way, this was brand new when I got it. It's still the plastic on it. And I finally put my first dent on it. You guys probably can't see it, but it's down here. Almost a year ago at this point, and I nearly cried, but honestly, it makes it my guitar and I'll never sell it. So this is the only guitar in my collection right now that I can definitively say will always be in the collection. Yeah, and this is then going to transition into two side chats because we're already running very long, but two side chats that I want to go into. And the first one is are mods a necessary part of offsets? I would say yes. I've played vintage, as I've said, I've played a lot of vintage Jags. I've played a few vintage Jazzmasters, not nearly as many, because anytime I see a vintage Jag in the area, I'm at the guitar store the next day, because I just love them. They are hard to play with that original bridge. A lot of players upgraded them to Mustang bridges. This one has a Tunematic bridge. This Jazzmaster actually came standard with the upgraded Mustang bridge. It just makes it worlds better. The other thing is a lot of people will get like bars to press this area down. I don't love that, just to get more sustain. But having this bridge moved up a little bit, which I guess is not a mod that you can do, but it's just a feature of this guitar, world of difference, makes it play perfectly for me. And then another thing that people need to realize is sometimes you do need to take that neck back or forward a little bit. That's just because, again, that angle over the bridge means that you don't have a lot of play in the action. If you're somebody like me who likes a higher action on your guitar, and I'm not even as high as Sam likes his action, so you need to angle that neck a little bit. However, there are really easy tools to do this. StewMac has literal just inserts for bolt-on guitars that you just put in, screw down, you're good. And the bridge is literally loosen the strings, take this off, put the other one on, you're fine. So I don't think it's as major or as drastic as people really make it out to be. And this guitar stays in tune better than any of my guitars, which is not at all an offset thing. Hopefully it'll be in tune for the demos that I show you. But yeah, it stays in tune, the best of all my guitars, and it is the reason I would consider myself a Fender fanatic today and not a Gibson fanatic. Which brings me to my question with Sam. Why don't you own one? And is it because of the mods?
I won't say it's because of the mods. I will go on a quick tangent about original offsets. I don't know much about them, but one of my favorite guitar players from the early 60s is Hank Garland, who was a jazz player, worked in Nashville on Elvis's songs and lots of like Roy Orbison stuff, and he had a deal with Gibson. He played he came up with the Birdland design. He used ESs and 345s and stuff like that, but for this one song, Little Sister by Elvis, he wanted this kind of bright rockabilly sound, and he picked up another guitar player in Nashville, I forget his name, but he had a Jazzmaster. So for that one song, he plays bright Fender.
I don't know if this is at all the same timeline, but I know Waylon Jennings had a Jazzmaster.
That's pretty cool. The Crickets, too, in that time played a Jaguar. But I just like that one song. You can hear whatever that original bridge, you know, it has such a cool sound, and I don't know if it was sustainable at all, but it's fun to hear like a Gibson jazz player for one song doing something like that.
Yeah. And why don't you own one?
So, I've loved Elvis Costello for a long time, and I've always wanted a Jazzmaster, but for some reason...
The nerd's favorite guitar player.
I'm a nerd, that's fair to say. I also love Alex Turner of the Arctic Monkeys, played one during Humbug. I love the Beach Boys, so I don't know. I've actually never played a Jazzmaster, oddly enough. I don't spend a lot of time in guitar stores, and my guitars, well, you do.
It's an addiction.
Never became a priority for me, but I will say a Sunburst Jazzmaster is in the works for me. Although with my new Beatles channel, I don't know if a Jazzmaster is like priority for that.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted one. And when I played your Jaguar, I remember you saying, okay, but when you first pick it up, don't play Surf or Kurt Cobain.
Yeah.
I think I picked up and I played This Charming Man by the Smiths.
You played This Charming Man, and then you played Come As You Are, or whatever that song is. Yeah.
And some Surf, of course. I put that on my string reverb. But
yeah, so it was a very failed attempt to say, like, hey, this thing can do other things.
Well, the funny thing is, it wasn't used on a lot of songs that you can really name, I guess. Some, but you use it for everything. And you make it work, so it's kind of cool.
And if you look at Johnny Marr, He's been a big advocate of the Jag. He uses it literally every time he plays anything now. And his career actually spans a lot of different styles of music. So it's interesting to see how he gets those different sounds. I've even seen, I don't know if I'll be able to find this photo, but I've even seen the Edge using a Jag at some points. And then we have to talk about it a little bit. The Tele is the undefeated king of the country guitar. The Jazzmaster, however, is one of those guitars that you kind of need for country. And that's a weird thing to say for a lot of people, but if you look at Ask Zach's channel, the channel Ask Zach, I'll put a link in the top chat. He is a Tele guy through and through, plays in Nashville, lives in Nashville, I think, and he has a Jazzmaster, a vintage Jazzmaster. And it's a sound, and I believe, again, Hank Garland might have used it. I don't know, but more modern, Chris Stapleton, who's probably, like, him and Jason Isbell are my favorite modern country players. Tennessee Whiskey, which is that big song with that big guitar riff, is a Jazzmaster.
Yeah.
And I think that it's having a weird moment in country. If you are a indie music fan and more like kind of modern psychedelia, which is the type of music that my girlfriend listens to, the reason she got a Jazzmaster was because she started dating a guitar nerd who pointed out that all of her favorite guitar players play Jazzmasters. And so in the modern music context, if you watch any type of modern music, which I am not at all an expert in, and I assume Sam is not at all an expert in, you will see offsets everywhere. Fender is also pushing offsets like crazy right now. Not so much the Jaguar, but the Jazzmaster. They're trying to get people to buy them. So I have a feeling we're not to the peak of the offsets yet. And the vintage market for offsets, it used to be, when I first got this Jag, one of the kind of draw points for getting into Jags is, oh, maybe one day I'll be able to afford one of those vintage Jags. And not only that, but be not afraid to mod it because they're so cheap that it doesn't really matter. Now they're $7,000. So I guess not. But I, again, don't feel the need for another Jag. I have one issue with this guitar, which is that it weighs about 10 pounds. It's weirdly heavy. I believe that's the chrome, but I have no idea. Do you choose a standard Fender over an offset? Or why do you choose an offset over a standard Fender?
It's a hard question, right? I mean, I guess the easy answer is that Teles and Strats are more popular. They're more available in some ways. More of our heroes played them. But I have no actual reason why you would have one over a Jazzmaster. I know that the guitarist of Norah Jones plays a Jazzmaster. Sonic Youth, there's so many different genres. Yeah. So I don't really have a reason. I guess if you're not, like, for me, having a tremolo arm isn't like crucial. If it was, I probably would have a Jazzmaster. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
I think that it's twofold. One is that they're hard guitars to get used to if you come from the traditional Fender background, especially a Jag that has the altered scale length. They're a little more loose in the strings, more slinky, I guess you could say. And they respond differently. And it just takes a little while to get used to. I don't think it's anything radical, but it's different. And you've got to be ready for that if you want to play one of these. The other thing is I know when I pick up a Strat, I can put it on the neck pickup and get the sound that everyone's heard through. I mean, I could name John Mayer, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all your favorite players, Clapton. Clapton, even George Harrison for a lot of Beatles stuff played a Strat, and a lot of later stuff played a Strat. So Jerry Garcia with the Grateful Dead, a lot of the famous Europe 72 and I guess that era stuff was Strat. So I think it's the recognizability of the sound that I think people are in some way afraid to not only get out of that bubble, but also don't know what to do with stuff outside that bubble. But also, like, I'll pick up a Strat to play John Mayer because that's what he played. And that's just a weird thing that we do. But sometimes I think it's worth it to, you know, pick up an Offset and play some stuff that you wouldn't necessarily play on it because you can get some really cool and unique tones. And that's kind of my my reason that you should have a Offset, not only as the cool sound guitar, but also as one of your main guitars, because sometimes you got to sound like yourself and not necessarily like Jimmy or like John Mayer or like SRV. So yeah.
I will say too that I think a large reason why in the new wave era and grunge people gravitated towards Offsets is because no one really wanted them.
They were affordable.
But nowadays you can afford different series of Fenders or Squires. You can have a Tele for cheaper than a certain Jazzmaster. So it's almost...
But isn't it interesting that they're increasing now in popularity?
They are now.
Yeah.
So it's a different age now for guitar buying.
But yeah. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. There will obviously be sound clips scattered throughout this video that I hope you enjoy. And if you want to comment future topics that you'd like us to discuss or any guitars that you want me to break down or even any guitars that Sam wants to break down, we're in constant contact. So yeah, please feel free to do that. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you, Sam, for joining me with this one.
And please buy my guitar.
Yeah, buy Sam's guitar. Don't buy this guitar. It's not for sale. All right. See you guys.